almost nobody understands online privacy, including me for the longest time. So, if you have any sort of discussion about privacy online, maybe you watch a YouTube video or read a blog post about privacy, you will hear a lot of different conflicting opinions. Some people will say that Proton Mail is the best service ever, and other people will say it's the devil incarnate. They will give all of your information to the government. Or maybe you'll watch a YouTube video saying that if you really want to be private, you have to delete every trace of yourself off of the internet and move into a cabin in the woods. And you'll probably hear noobs to the privacy space asking questions like, should I use the Tor browser whenever I'm signing into my bank? Will that make me more private? I heard it in a YouTube video. Because all of this confusion around privacy is basically just a big misunderstanding of the entire concept of privacy. Now, I understand because when you're new to the world of privacy, things can get very overwhelming and confusing quickly. Because when I first started caring about privacy, I would watch these same videos where it makes you think that you need to go into hiding if you actually want any level of privacy on the internet. It just seems way too overwhelming, and for a while I just kind of gave up on the whole privacy thing, which is not that great. So in this video, I want to try to cut through all of the noise and really help you understand your online privacy and what exactly you need to do in order to stay private on the internet. So the first question that you're going to have to ask yourself if you care about privacy is why? Why do you care about online privacy? No, seriously, this isn't a rhetorical question. I want you to think about it for a second and then tell me. I think that a lot of people would be kind of confused by this, and maybe they would say something like, I don't want Google to be able to read my search history, I don't want them to know my browsing history, I don't want companies like Microsoft to be able to snoop through my emails, and I don't want companies like Facebook collecting all of this data about me so that they can give me targeted advertisements. But the thing is, no two people are going to have exactly the same answer as to why they care about privacy online. Maybe somebody else will answer this question by saying they want to be anonymous on the internet, and they don't want the government to be able to track them down. But depending on your privacy needs, I might recommend completely different tools. If you just don't want Google reading through your emails, I'm going to recommend you something completely different than if you're literally Edward Snowden. And so in order to better understand this, I have made this chart right here. I call this the Privacy-Anonymity Spectrum, because on this channel, we're all on the spectrum. And I basically divided things into 4 different levels of privacy, depending on your needs and wants. Now, some people call this a threat model. In this video, I'm going to call this levels of privacy, because I just think that it's easier to understand. I'm going to oversimplify a few things in this video, but hopefully this should help you understand some things about privacy. So this is going to be a spectrum, and of course on the left side over here you have less privacy and more convenience. This is going to be the easiest option that most people in the world are going to pick. And on the far side you will have less convenience and more privacy. Now let's start off first with the normie. So this is going to be your average person who doesn't care about privacy. They don't really know about Google collecting all of your data, or maybe they just don't care. And so they're going to do everything that a normal person would do. They're going to use Gmail or Outlook for their email. They're going to use Google Chrome. They're going to share everything on Facebook and Instagram. And so this person has almost no privacy. But even the normie cares about their privacy a little bit. For example, if you were to ask a normie, can I read through all of the messages on your phone? They would probably say no. And so even the normie cares about privacy a little bit, but it's mostly just privacy from family or friends or even strangers. And a lot of people would just call this security. So the normie is going to do things like have a password protecting his phone or his computer. They might even use a password manager. They might use two-factor authentication. And all of these are good security practices, but they're not really going to protect their privacy. Because I would consider privacy to be protecting your information from these big companies. So if the normie uses Gmail, he is correct that other people cannot read his emails, because Google has very good security, but Google themselves can read the normie's email whenever they want. And of course, the normie probably has some rationale saying, I have nothing to hide. And of course, if you don't care about your privacy at all, I don't really think that's a good idea. I have a whole nother video explaining why I care about privacy. But I think most people that watch this video are probably going to fall into the second category here. I call this the privacy conscious. And so this person doesn't want their personal data or their messages or their emails being collected and read by corporations. Maybe you find it creepy that Google knows everything about you. Maybe you don't want Google training their AI with your Gmail. And so if you fall into the privacy conscious category, you're probably going to do some things like this. You're probably going to use hardened Firefox or Brave instead of using Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. You would probably use something like DuckDuckGo or Brave Search instead of Google. You might use something like ProtonMail instead of Outlook. You might use Linux instead of Windows or Mac OS. And you probably don't use social media that often. You might even try to convince your friends not to message you on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, and instead to use an end-to-end encrypted app like Signal. And I see a lot of people saying something like, I have nothing to hide, but I also have nothing that I particularly want to share with you. And this is probably going to be the category that most people watching this video are going to fall under. But I also want to note that this is a spectrum, so you don't have to have all of these requirements met in order to be privacy conscious. Like, if you still use Windows instead of Linux, I'm not going to gatekeep privacy and tell you that you're doing things wrong. I think that any step that you take in order to mitigate some data collection about you is always a good thing. That's why I have it as a spectrum here, and not just different categories. Because most people aren't going to squarely fit into one of these boxes, you'll probably be somewhere along the spectrum. But I do think that if you really care about your privacy online, you will meet most, if not all of these criteria. Of course, there's other additional things that you can do, but this is just meant to be a quick overview. And I would say the next level up is going to be the activist. So this is where we start getting into anonymity. So if you're not sure what the difference between privacy and anonymity is, I would say privacy is maybe me telling you that I have a ProtonMail account. Maybe I'll tell you that you can email me at ericmurphy@protonmail.com. Not my real email address, but as an example. So in this case, my email under ProtonMail would be private. That means that only I can read my emails, ProtonMail can't read it, or anyone else. But I would not be anonymous, because you know that this email address is tied to my real-world identity. My real name is even in there. And if I really wanted to be anonymous, maybe you would see my email, but you wouldn't know that it's mine. You wouldn't know whose it is. So maybe I would sign up for an email service that doesn't require any personal info. I wouldn't put my real name or anything. I wouldn't pay for it with a credit card, because that can be tied back to my real identity. Maybe I would even use a trusted VPN or Tor in order to sign up for this email, so they don't even have my IP address, as that can be tied back to me. And so if you're in this category, the activist category, you're probably going to care a lot about your anonymity online. You don't want people knowing that it's you sending these emails, or you running this social media account. And at this point, you're probably worried a little bit about the government being able to track you down. Maybe you're a political activist, and you might be getting on the wrong side of law enforcement a little bit. Maybe you're a journalist in your country that's uncovering something that the government might not like people to know about. But you don't necessarily have to be an activist or a journalist in order to fall into this category. Maybe you're just a little bit more paranoid than most people, like me. And you basically just want the government to know as little as possible about you. So someone in this category would probably try to be anonymous most of the time. And so instead of just using Firefox or Brave, you might use Tor instead. You might use the Tor browser in order to hide your IP address. You might not want to use ProtonMail, because ProtonMail has given out some info to the government before and had an activist arrested accordingly. So you might use an email address that collects no personal info at all. You might even PGP encrypt your email. You'll probably never use social media under your real name. Maybe you'll even use something like Monero or Cash to pay for things online anonymously. Maybe you'll only use Signal when messaging people. You'll probably give people and services fake info when possible. You might use a fake name or an alias so you don't have to give out your real-world identity. Maybe you'll even use a custom version of Android so that Google can't trace you through your smartphone. And most people probably aren't going to want to get to this level, because you are starting to see a lot less convenience. If you're going to be using tools like Tor, or maybe setting up your own email server, or maybe using Monero to pay for things, all of this requires a lot of technical knowledge, and you'll have to be very careful not to expose any real-world information about yourself. For the average person, this is going to be way too much. Most normal people are just going to want to use something like Brave browser or ProtonMail, where you can just download an app on your phone and call it a day. And the last level here, I'm calling this the ghost. So this is if you are Edward Snowden levels of infamous. The alphabet boys probably really want to get you at this point. Maybe you're exposing government secrets, and at this point, the government really wants to get you, and you're going to have a very difficult life from here on out. So you'll probably have to be fully anonymous online. You'll probably have to live a nomadic lifestyle. You probably won't be able to stay in your home. You'll have to leave all your friends and family behind. At this point, you're probably not going to use email at all because it's inherently insecure. You're probably going to work for yourself or not even work at all. Your electronics are going to be as encrypted as possible. That is, if you even use them at all. Because the more that you use electronics, the easier it's going to be to catch you. You're probably not going to own anything under your real name. It's probably going to be under an anonymous LLC. And so if it isn't already obvious, most people are never going to need this level of privacy in your life. Only very few people that are actually wanted by the government are going to need this level of privacy. And if you do need this level of privacy, first of all, good luck. Second of all, you probably shouldn't be taking advice from random YouTubers who put Wojaks in their videos. You should probably be consulting experts and lawyers, not just random YouTubers about privacy. So what I'm trying to show in this video is that there are vastly different levels of privacy that you might want or need. I think that most people are probably going to fall under the privacy conscious category. You probably just don't want your personal data collected by a bunch of corporations. And even for my own level of privacy, I would consider myself somebody in the middle here. So between privacy conscious and activist, because I don't really care about trying to be as anonymous as possible. That's why I have a YouTube channel showing my real face and real name. Probably not something you want to do if you really want to be anonymous online. At the same time, I will try to be anonymous in some places, like if I'm signing up for a mailing list, I probably won't put in my real email address or my real name, just because you don't need to know that. Maybe I'm a little bit paranoid, but that is just me. And so you have to evaluate where on the spectrum you want to be. How much privacy do you want, and how much convenience do you want to lose? But the biggest problem when people talk about privacy online is that they conflate all of these categories. So one person will say that Proton Mail is amazing, and another person will say that Proton Mail is terrible for your privacy. And the thing is, they're both right. But it completely depends on where you are on the spectrum. So maybe somebody over here, closer to the activist side of the spectrum, would not want to use Proton Mail, because they are able to collect your IP address. They do ask you to identify yourself with another email or maybe a phone number. And so if you want complete anonymity, it may not be the best idea. But if all you are concerned about is you don't want Google to read through your emails, then Proton Mail is absolutely a great choice. Another example, should you use Tor? So Tor is a great tool for some privacy levels or some threat models. If you really want to be anonymous online, then Tor is probably the closest that you're going to get to that. But if you just want to be a normal privacy-conscious individual, then Tor is probably going to be complete overkill in 99% of cases. Like for me personally, I don't use Tor in my daily life at all. Now, of course, this is a very simplified explanation, but I hope this does help you in understanding your online privacy more. And hopefully with this video, you can improve discussion about privacy online. So maybe instead of leaving a comment on a YouTube video saying, what's the best private email service? That is a very vague question, and people are not going to understand your specific needs. And so instead of saying that, you might want to say, what is the best email service for being completely anonymous online? You might also say, what is the best email provider that cannot read my emails? I don't really care about anonymity. Because I will give you two completely different answers for each of those questions. So in most of my videos, I'm going to be primarily talking to this audience right here. I think this is probably going to be 98% of people that care about privacy online. But of course, I'll also try to give some advice for people who are a little bit more paranoid. So hopefully this video clears up a lot of confusion about privacy and anonymity online, and you're able to decide exactly what level of privacy you're okay with online.